Thank you. Before we call our meeting to order tonight, let's stand and have a pledge and a prayer. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Remain standing. Father, thank you for this time we have together tonight. We pray that you would lead us as a board to make good, sound decisions for our district, and that you would continue your hand of protection around our staff and our students. And as we move forward into this school year, we just pray for peace among our school body, and that you would give refreshment and energy to our teachers who need it so much. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, we'll now call our meeting to order. It's the regularly scheduled school board meeting for October, and the first thing on our agenda is a Cobra Pride Award, and Mr. Janaski has the first one.
All right. Well, I'm super excited to be able to announce a young gentleman who's a senior from Fountain Lake. 16,000 students across the country are recognized with this little special honor. And he is probably one of the few students we've had from Fountain Lake who has earned the honor of a semifinalist for National Merit Scholar,
Wow.
Tristan Wynn. He also has a 34 on his ACT score.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Go, dude.
This is a presentation.
How do you earn this?
First step is the PSAT.
Okay.
So after that, it's based on his academic scores.
Okay.
So
That's
I think
excellent.
when I looked in the book, I think there's
Get a picture.
6 in the county.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
That's awesome.
That is a great accomplishment.
Congratulations.
You're going to get your picture taken, so we have it for posterity. Forever.
Right.
Shift that way.
Well, scoot over a little bit this way. Everybody in.
Keep on going, a little more.
A little more?
There you go, perfect. On
Okay.
three. 1, 2, 3. Very good.
Good
And
job.
you can move the camera.
Yeah. That's
Good luck,
awesome.
Pete. And you just got your application submitted. So he's moving on.
Moving on up the list. That's excellent. Always good to hear those things. And Ms. Curry, I believe you have one?
I do. So I have Miss Tammy Catlett here, and she is representing our Fountain Lake PTO, our Parent Teacher Organization, to receive this award. So the PTO donated about $3,500 to our building to we're going into the elementary conference room. So they gave us some money to purchase furniture and different items so that our teachers can come together in a shared space and be able to plan and have PLCs. So it looks amazing. I think you guys saw a little bit of it today. So she's been working real hard this year with our PTO and been very involved. So she's here today to accept this award on behalf of them. So we are very
Some of us got to tour through there today, and it does, it looks awesome. Well, I'm so glad that y'all did that, so they would have that space.
Well, they do a real good job of doing, they try to alternate between providing for the teachers and the kids.
Mhm. It's terrific, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate
All right, we're gonna get your picture taken.
Thanks.
Yeah, we all love it.
All right, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Very good.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is the consent agenda items. Board members have had a chance to look over those items. If there are no questions, we will consider those approved by unanimous consent. We'll move into the superintendent's update. Dr. Murphy?
Had a chance to kind of review the financial summary. Really no highlights to be made at this point in time of the year. We'll be entering into revenue collections, and they'll be reflected probably over the next 2 months. Expenditures are somewhat on track for this time of the year. That'll be my first item A. Is there any questions in that regard? Second item I have is Mr. George, Mrs. Greason, and myself attended a safety summit recently with ASBA. Really good cross-section of what schools in the state of Arkansas are doing, and kind of framed school safety in the context of how Arkansas ranks nationally in comparison to the Safety Coalition. Some discussion throughout the day from a wide range of presenters, from the chairperson of the safety committee to a resource officers who is nationally recognized up at Morrilton. So any comments either of you would have, having a chance to attend that?
I thought it was really.
That was good.
Yeah.
Very good information.
You know, kind of aligned, some of the things they talked about kind of aligned with things that we're doing or are preparing to do. So I feel like we're in a good,
Yeah, I would say that as a school district, for anyone listening or anyone present here tonight, the work that we're doing with our crisis planning kind of is a good solid framework of how we would ensure a high degree of safety and protection of our students, from entry points to window numbering to access onto the campus. Probably a couple of takeaways that I've kind of talked to Hayden and Chief about is safety is more than facilities. Safety is a culture. Safety is a culture of the staff, and safety is a culture of the students. And so collectively, you know, to have a safe learning environment, it takes parents, students, staff members working collectively together to not only trust each other, but report anything that they might find unusual in that regard. So we have an upcoming meeting here, I think tomorrow night. Several board members will be attending the training that's in Hot Springs. And so we look forward to networking there with board members and governance teams, superintendents from around the region. And I think there's be board members that will be planning to attend that. That's tomorrow night, 5:30.
yeah, the Region 10.
So that'll be the Region 10 meeting, and then of course, later on, once we get later into the fall, there will be an opportunity for a state conference where board members will be attending that as well and networking on a statewide basis. So that's kind of an update as it relates to item B. Item C, we had, as you can see on the agenda near the bottom, we had a good attendance at our PPC meeting. Reflective of topics within that meeting, there was a wide array of topics, probably a couple of things that I would highlight. Two things that, well, maybe I would say more than two. One thing that kind of came out was, you know, as people pursue their masters, oftentimes pursuing advanced degrees, there's a pretty significant cost prior to the finalization of that degree. And so it was presented by the committee for us to give consideration to placing in between the bachelor's and the master's degree, what's called a Bachelor of Science plus 15. So if an employee would be halfway towards achieving their master's, they typically would not receive that degree in 1 year. And so it would give them access to some compensation. And so one thing that we can do at no cost in the context of a significant impact to the budget would be to put those lanes in there, taking the difference between the money between the Bachelor of Science degree and the master's, which is roughly $4,200. We were looking at that increment of step, cutting that in half and allowing for that BS plus 15 to exist, and then possibly an MS plus 15. That could be a structural change to the salary schedule without commitment to new money. So that was in there as a recommendation that came forthright from the high school concerns, something to give consideration to. There was also a mention that some additional policy cleanup, ensuring that we have PPC representation of classified staff. Our current policy indicates that we have representation on certified staff. So making The policy also echo not only for certified personnel, but also classified personnel to have a seat at the table going into the upcoming year. Other topics, of course, we've had a work session as a part of the work of our work session as a governance structure. We've been hearing individuals talking about school calendars on a statewide basis. There's been options for school calendars that look fundamentally different from a traditional calendar. The board and myself are open to giving consideration to learning environments, but the decisions need to be made in the best academic interest of students. And so in some of our discussions in a work session, having a school day that begins at roughly 7:40 and doesn't end till 4:10 or 4:15 is too lengthy in the context of the length of day to get into a 4-day week. We did have some serious discussions about learning loss and what happens to children in the summer. And if we could shorten that window of time, what would that look like in terms of the overall impact to academics? And so I've sent them a mock-up of a 4-day calendar week that would extend into June and start early. That's more of a year-round approach, but in a general sense, when we had this PPC meeting, I conveyed to the teachers that there wasn't a high degree of interest right now until we get additional research that indicates that this lengthened day and a 4-day week would benefit academic learning, that we didn't have a high degree of interest in pursuing that.
That is correct.
So, and I don't know if there's any comments any of the board would want to make on that topic, but that's kind of what I conveyed to the PPC at this last meeting. And so, if there's not a pursuit of, and a year-round approach with a month off in the summer versus roughly 10.5 to 11 weeks would feel totally different to our community, which would be a major change. I don't know whether there's interest in that or not.
I would just say that the state, when they allowed the 4-day week, we all know they gave options for other types of schedules. And so, because the board's priority is academic achievement, academic learning for our students, and because the pandemic has wrought so much havoc on that, the board needs to take that as a serious consideration for what we want our calendar to look like. What is going to be the best approach for academic learning? So I would say that there's definitely, we have not come to a consensus among ourselves. We're just tossing around some ideas, but I know that we will consider all options that the state allows in having that discussion, because I don't see the need in changing a schedule if it's not, if we can't truly understand the academic benefit of it. So anyway, all that said, to say the board will start talking about this in a serious way.
The other thing that I would tell you is it's fairly time sensitive in the context. If you're going to make a significant change to a school calendar, you need to do that and give people the time to plan.
Yes.
So that change would be more inclined to be a discussion in the fall and an announcement in the early spring versus an announcement in the late spring.
And I could see us having this conversation and being decided by the end of the year, where we could, not necessarily the last week of the year, that's not what I'm saying, but just this, fall into the end of the semester, we could have our proposal ready and then run it by PPC first. Maybe sooner.
Is it more of a, would you like to have further discussion as a board, or would you like for me to guide further discussion through the PPC and the community and bring that back to the board?
I would say that. I would say the community and the PPC, for sure.
I agree, because we don't want to make this decision in isolation.
Because it's gonna affect more than just, just thinking of working parents and
Right.
stuff like that. 4 days would be you know, having that extra day to worry about.
And I think-
It'd be something, a big change for them.
All of the options that the state allows should be part of that discussion.
Oh, yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Give them all
not
the options.
just right now, the way it is, or a 4-day week. I think we really need to explore all of those options. So,
So you want, between Mr. Campbell and myself, to try to guide that discussion and try to bring something back, because we'll be moving into November. And so.
you want to have that discussion with the PPC?
Yeah, I mean,
And,
it's just,
because
the
I,
point I'm trying to allude to is in our initial discussions, what I don't want to do is engage in a community conversation that the board is unwilling to approve.
right,
And it's 4-day lengthened week, it starts at 7:30 in the morning and ends at
Yeah.
4 o'clock, then there's not a reason to do that with our community if the board's unwilling to approve it.
right,
That's what I'm alluding to.
right.
I can go with that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, everybody's got really excited about the 4-day thing, because there are some schools in our area that are doing that. But, you know, honestly, when we had our discussion, none of us, to be quite frank, were very keen on the 4-day week from an academic standpoint. So I don't know that a strictly 4-day school week is something the board would consider. You know,
Well, I'll take what this discussion here is tonight, try to gather some additional information from the board and take that back to PPC. What I just don't want to do is if there is going to need to be an element of community engagement and engagement with the PPC, we could, with the understanding, we could seek, but ultimately the board has to approve the framework of the calendar. And so, you know, I just felt like we're at a point where we might want to convey publicly kind of the perception of our work session, what that information was that we discussed, and
Yeah.
at least have that out there versus me conveying it by myself. or
right,
the PPC.
yes, and I agree, and we were all in agreement with that in our meeting. Brian was here, he was on board with that too, so, a strictly 4-day calendar is not the direction the board believes we need to go. Can we take some other options? Yes. But, and we want, understanding that 4-day work weeks sound great, and they are when you can have a 3-day weekend. We get that, right? But we don't feel like that's the best academic calendar for kids. So we want to consider the teachers in this, the staff, and the students, and come up with something that will work, because I hear teachers saying they need more planning time, you know, their planning time keeps getting shortened, and, or they don't get any at all. So I hear that, and we need to do something that considers the teachers and the administrators in that. So we're gonna just keep putting our heads together, and kind of
Okay.
talk to PPC about it. I'm not trying to be a hard nose about it, but what we do want to do, the primary driver of this is learning.
Something would enhance.
Student learning. We have got to recover some student learning loss and get these kids, not just, we gotta get them back up to speed, but then we want to get them moving ahead and getting them better than they were, you know? So that's the driver.
Okay. Is there any other topics that you see there on the PPC agenda that you would like for me to try to, that maybe, in kind of reviewing that you want me to try to address with the board or the public tonight? We had some discussions centered around Wi-Fi, had some discussions about who might go the modulars, 4-day
Talk
week.
about that, yeah. What about the pay scale for unused sick days when retiring? What was that about?
kind of seeking rationale to possibly increase that. Wasn't that kind of the discussion, if you recall, Mr. Campbell? They're wanting us to give consideration to an increased allotment in money based on an unused sick day for retirement.
And right now, it's based on their actual pay rate.
For the first,
Just on the years, isn't it?
No, it's based on
sub,
long-term sub.
long-term sub,
And it's actually, now it's all the days are the same amount because our long-term sub pay used to be higher than, let's see, what was the deal on that? We pay $100, we were paying $100 a day for the first X number of days.
45.
And 45, and then the next set of days, we were paying a long-term sub rate, which at the time was less.
Oh, gotcha.
And now, long-term sub daily rate is $100 a day. So when you retire, it's $100 a day right now that we pay, tied to the long-term sub rate.
and so when they,
Okay.
what they could bank is up to 90 days paid, because that's what they can accrue in the pool. And then they're paid out anything above 90 on a yearly basis.
Yes.
But the cap's at 90, and so that's what they would be looking
So their actual, if you were to calculate their actual daily rate of what they're paid in their salary, it would be considerably higher than $100.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
at. Yes.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. That's part of this discussion was that, hey, if I've got unused sick days, I know in a corporate setting, you would be paid at whatever rate your pay is. It would be figured on a daily rate, and you would be paid that amount. If you're getting that stuff paid out to you.
And ours has been based on what we would pay if you had taken the days. What we would
What
pay
we
the
would pay
sub.
sub
Gotcha.
to recover that day and
Gotcha.
expenses.
And
So-
we capped that at 90. Has there been any discussion allowing it to increase from 90? Which would be they would get it at the end of their retirement if we allowed it to go to 100, 120, whatever.
Right.
They would get more money that way instead of piecemealing, because what I understand now, it's capped at 90. If you got 95 at the end of the year, you get paid for those 5 extra days, right?
Yeah,
Can
they're not
I
losing,
roll over
they're not
90
losing
days?
the day.
Right, they're not losing,
Yeah,
we're
they're
paying them.
paid less for it.
Right.
So that could be an option as well, but that's what that topic was.
And they may not be interested
Right.
in that.
Any other,
I mean, that might be an incentive to not take any sick time.
Right, if you're allowed to accumulate
Accumulate
more,
more.
right,
look at the pay.
but I think there's two camps when it comes to employee attendance. You've got one group that accrues, banks, I mean, they got a high rate of being present, and so they fall into this category, and then there's others that struggle to have days remaining at the conclusion of the given year.
So you could also build in an incentive that if you go over 100 days, you can get a bump in your pay.
What you might do is.
And if you
find-
have less than 100, you're at
That
the starting, that substitute rate, if you go
take it to
to,
100.
go over 100, anything over the 100, you get 1.5 times that sub pay or something like that. I mean, there would be, then you don't want people coming to work when they're sick,
Right.
but you want to give them an
I mean, it'd be a
opportunity.
pretty big incentive, which we can talk about it later, but
Yeah.
anything over that 90, you pay whatever rate.
And we could have the PPC come up with an option, like, would that be appropriate to have them?
Yeah, it would be,
Come up
I don't
with
mind
a
taking it back
proposal?
to them, but any proposal that they come up with, we'd have to, Tanya and I'd have to try to evaluate the impact
Yeah,
annually to the budget.
yeah,
And, you know, it just, what you know, an example of that would be is if you alter this and it has roughly a 15,000 incremental dollar difference to what it might look like on an annual basis. It's subtle in nature, but if you do those types of subtle things in
Right.
multiple places, it's $100,000 before you know it.
You
Right.
bet.
So,
okay,
There's a dollar value to whatever
Correct.
it is.
well, yeah, I agree, but
Anyway,
let's let that go for now, and we can
In summary, what I would
revisit.
tell you is they're clearly gaining a defined role, they're participating on a monthly basis, we're present, and there's good dialogue.
Good, it looks like it.
Who comes up with the agenda? I was reading something like. who-
Sure.
Did
So
they do that?
initially, to try to get them kind of, because COVID and everything that had been going on kind of stymied everything that we had been doing. We've been doing a quarterly approach to PPC. I knew because we might potentially be having some calendar discussions, I engaged with them back in the summer to challenge them to meet monthly. So we're trying to meet every month. I think it's the last Wednesday of the month, as we just put it on a schedule. And so to answer your question, initially, I tried to give them some topics that I had been hearing about. I've kind of flipped that now, because technically they need to build the agenda as the teachers, and so they have representatives from each building. Those individuals can convey, a lot of those topics came directly from teachers that were not on the PPC. And so some buildings emailed their teachers and said, we're gonna have a PPC meeting, any topic that you'd like to get on, kind of on a discussion board, or get it out there on the agenda, you know, that's how a lot of those topics resonated onto the agenda, and a PPC member volunteered to build the agenda and share it with the group.
Good.
Last question I had on it was the one talks about the incentive. Another one, I guess that.
Are you in elementary, middle, or high school?
That was high school.
The bachelor's
Yeah.
plus 15.
Nope, on down, second page.
Second page.
Talks about the one-year contracts, base pay,
Oh, not
two-year
second.
contracts.
So, there was some discussion statutorily by law, what can you do? And can you have a multi-year contract with an individual teacher? And statutorily, that you may issue a one-year contract, and every one of those one-year contracts issued falls under the Fair Teacher Dismissal Act. The only contract on a certified employee that is allowed to be a multi-year contract is the superintendent contract, and it is not governed by fair teacher dismissal. So, kind of the clause was, in some of these positions, it's hard to retain someone, hard to recruit, hard to find, could we enter into a multi-year agreement? And technically, I do not believe the law allows for us to enter into only, it allows us to engage in a one-year contract. So that's what that topic was. Any other questions?
Good discussion.
At this point, I'll defer to Hayden.
All right, Mr. Campbell, can pull it up. So on these modular buildings, if you go
Run into
back,
a problem,
what's
huh?
that? Ran into a little bit of a problem. We got a solution though. So back in July, y'all board approved the purchase of 2 modulars, a little over $500,000. The first thing we ran into, before we even brought it to the school board, was getting this thing approved by the state. The state did approve the use of the ESSER funds to proceed with this purchase. As we presented this to Box Modular, who was awarded the bid, they came back and said, whoa, you're using ESSER funds. What guidelines have you done on your side, the state side? We worked really close with Tim Kane. He's the director of facilities for the overall school, state of Arkansas. And he says, man, you're meeting all your guidelines perfect. He says, let me pass this on to my attorneys. So the attorneys, state of Arkansas, worked with Box Modular for almost 1 month, and no one could agree on any terms, just because the list of federal guidelines were so long, because we're using federal funds, that Box Modular really did not want to play. I wouldn't say play nice with this. We may still be going with them on the hospital one. It's just from their seat on how we're checks and balances on our end. Tim Kane recommended to myself to go through a contractor. We've, in the past, kind of partnership with Hill and Cox for some, renderings, how to move forward back in the millage days. We've looped in Robbie Cox, and I've been working with Zane as well as Hill and Cox, just as a middleman. to help manage that money, where we pay Hill and Cox first, and they can cut that check, not using ESSER funds, which was completely legal to do. So that kind of brings us to where we're at today. So when we looped in Hill and Cox, they had some really good recommendations that I really did not see. If you want to scroll on down, Mr. Campbell, the hospital modular we feel very comfortable with. Have recommended to Hill and Cox to move forward and proceed on building out the hospital modular. I say we're probably 2 weeks away. Go ahead.
You said proceed with building the modular?
Proceed
Explain that.
with giving us quotes for what it takes to drop the modular in place, and a turnkey for the concrete to go in place, the footings, rebar, get electrical to the building.
So you're saying we would still get the modular from Box,
As of right now, yes.
but they would literally do nothing to set it up?
No, so Box will still deliver it, so we're using Hill and Cox as a middleman.
Just a contract.
Correct, just to help to fund the project
Site-
using
site is
ESSER
not
funds. Since we
conducive.
couldn't meet the federal guidelines ourselves, we pass this over to Hill and Cox, let them act as a middleman. The state of Arkansas is really not in the loop.
Yeah,
If that
but
makes
didn't-
sense.
So then, does that mean our money that we pay to Box is going down? Because theirs was the turnkey quote.
Yes, and that still is the case.
Only for the building
For the
of the
building.
modular and the delivery, not
Correct.
the actual hooking up the electric.
But they were gonna
ramps.
do that, right?
What they were doing, they were bringing
Everything's set
the,
up and put the building.
correct, they
They
were.
were gonna
yeah,
put it
they
on
were-
piers, they were gonna strap it down.
Right, to our existing foundation. So what we were gonna have to do, is expand where the hospital pavilion used to be. That concrete slab that's existing is probably about 48 or 56 foot long. This modular building is gonna be 77 feet long. So it wasn't, on their side, it wasn't turnkey. I mean, we had some groundwork to do on our end.
Right.
To get ready for these modulars to come in.
Right.
So looping at Hill and Cox, we could turnkey it through them where they would contract with Box Modular, deliver the building, this location, here's existing specs, you already gave Fountain Lake, keep these requirements. Hill and Cox is gonna pour the footers, they're gonna get the electrical to the location, get everything ready to go for us.
And we will bring that number to you.
Correct, and we're probably about 2 weeks away from having that number.
So when we approved the original quote,
Mm-hmm.
you're saying it did not include hooking up the electrical?
No.
It was
No.
literally the building?
building.
Correct.
And they would,
Get it here.
Yes.
Just the buildings.
No, just the buildings.
Strap it in, and then we're going to do.
and
Right.
configure the interior?
That's already, Box Modular already has the interior configured.
Right.
Yeah.
We're gonna do the building.
Yeah, they're overseeing everything at the time, where they dropped the building. The only thing Fountain Lake had to provide, we're not doing sewer or plumbing. We had to provide a place for them to drop the building,
Mhm.
and then
For the
they
electrical.
secured down Hurricane Acres to our existing structure. Where that be, like in the elementary side, it would be gravel.
So what part are they not happy doing?
They did not want to meet Arkansas federal ESSER guidelines. They did not want to work with those guidelines.
Well, what kind of guidelines were they? I mean,
Yeah,
literally, if they're driving it in and setting it down,
So they had David Bacon Fair Wage Standard Act that we went through all these federal guidelines of, even since Arkansas was paying Box, is Box gonna meet fair labor standards when whoever's building the building? So, I mean, there is a list, about 15 items that I can send you of what they require for Box to meet. And Box just came out and said no, that we're not gonna go through all these requirements to meet
Because
them.
probably their bid was not reflective of a prevailing wage market in the
Correct.
area. So
Right.
depending on where the modular is actually built at, that'll have an impact on the prevailing wage market. They provided us a bid based on their current labor market spec. And
Okay.
so that's where the dispute occurred, because when they were building it in an off-site location, going to drive, pull it in
Yeah.
2 pieces and bring it here to our location. The piece that I would convey is not the yellow, but the gray, where Hill and Cox has got to get directly involved, is in the footing and egress. So the other thing that was not considered in our bid was accessibility and railing. And so this modular that's being pulled in here will be 32 inches off the ground at the lowest point.
okay, so I know Lloyd missed part of that conversation, and I think these two did too. But what you were saying is that they're rolling it in here and they're leaving it on its axle, or they're leaving it on their wheels. So literally it's rolling in on wheels and they're just gonna strap it down. They
They'll
won't take
take
it
the wheels off.
Yeah, they'll take the wheels
So
off.
when the wheels come off, it's still gonna be, at the lowest point, it's gonna be
32
32
inches.
inches, kind of like ground, if you bought a mobile.
Right, same
Right.
thing.
They're going,
They'll take
they're
the
going to put
axles
it
out.
together, they're gonna seal it down the middle,
I'm like, what are
cause
they
it's coming
doing?
in two pieces.
They're selling us the building, that's all.
Yeah,
That's all they're doing.
Right,
But now, my question is for Hill and Cox, that will not be ESSER funds.
So we'd still be using ESSER funds to fund this project through Hill and Cox. They would take that money, they would cut a check from Hill and Cox to Box,
Okay,
alleviating the federal guideline issue.
okay.
That's kind of a loophole.
It is, they've done it many times. That was the first thing they recommended to me before even saying that.
So,
It's a flow through.
correct, but I want to remind everyone that we just revised an ESSER budget, and through our bonus structure and the amount of money that we allocated for the box modulars at roughly
Right.
550,000, if we go back to the ESSER money for the ramps and the other things that we may have, it would be.
And that'll have to
eating
come
in-
out of a different place, right?
Well, or you would revise your budget and take this 300, if you remember, there was $348,000 sitting there earmarked for possibly a staff
Yeah.
bonus in a future year.
Yeah.
You would be reducing that number, which
Yeah.
would be reducing that bonus. So
And I don't-
that we just need to be very careful when we say that we could use ESSER funds, we would be creating a future revision to the
Right.
existing
Right,
budget.
the ESSER budget might reflect next year.
Correct,
Different, different number unless we use
local funds.
local funds.
I think once, until we get a final price of
We
what,
need to know, we don't need to worry about which fund it's coming out of
Yeah.
until we know what the number is.
Right.
until we get the number from Hill and Cox on what it's gonna cost for the grade, because you're gonna need grade there, and the other place, you're gonna need power at there, the other place, until then, I mean, you don't know what you're gonna be getting into.
Right.
And my whole deal about the box, I mean, is there somebody else you can use?
So we went out to 15 other vendors, and they all said the same thing, that we do not want to go by the federal guidelines. Yeah.
And the other thing that I've done since then, because of this challenge, is we did go back and talk to Hill and Cox specifically. If this, because of this grade, if you can kind of look at that building a little bit, we're trying to gain egress 32 inches, and of course, we're gaining egress near the back, which is the closest proximity to the annex. This building you're looking at would serve secondary age students. So this is the one for the high school. And
It goes right outside where the old pavilion was.
yes, and so one of those ramps is gonna go pretty close to where the alumni park is at.
Uh-huh.
The other ramp is gonna get almost over there to where the last handicap parking space is before you walk into or across the road.
Yeah.
So, when you kind of place this in here, it fits real nicely until you put these ramps on here that are ADA accessible. And so before we finalize where this whole thing goes, we want to see how well it's gonna fit. We did another walkthrough last
Tuesday.
Wednesday. Tuesday
Yeah,
or
I think
Wednesday, we
Tuesday,
got
last Tuesday.
together and reviewed this again on this. We feel a lot more comfortable about this one
Yeah,
than we do
there's some
the
issues
elementary
on the
school.
elementary.
Right.
So on this one, can you not move those doors down
Move them in which direction?
towards the parking lot?
You can, but the door egress is gonna have to swing out. We're dealing with a roughly 4-foot ramp, 3-foot door. So however that door ends up swinging, it's gonna have to be at the conclusion. By having that ramp at the back, it gives us, we have less fall to contend with. We looked at putting the doors in the middle, we looked at putting the doors on the upper corner, and we looked at the back entry point. And the back entry point seems to be the most conducive on allowing our ramp to use less of the parking lot and less of the area getting into the space.
Yeah, but wouldn't you-
We'll have egress from the front.
Are you saying,
With steps.
Corey, to move the door here? And
Yeah.
then you just have to have a ramp straight up into it? Would that not eliminate a whole section of ramp?
Well, it would, but it won't fit. because the fall that you have to have, the distance you have to go, if you don't turn that ramp, it won't fit into that space without being out in the road and back over into the alumni park. You might say, no way, but I think the ADA spec on that is,
Yeah,
so many inches.
so many
for every
inches per
3 feet.
Right,
So it's a very gradually sloping ramp.
right. One thing I would say, you see on the screen, right now it's reflecting at 27 foot. That's kind of what we decided on last week, just because originally we were at a 24 foot. And then, it was a little bit, 24 foot, but a little bit longer on the length.
Right.
We were sitting at a $62,000 ADA ramp, just to have the 2 doors in the front. Just to cover with aluminum ramp,
Just the
that
ramp.
span, we're at 60 grand, so you're like, you know,
The ramp,
correct.
not the concrete.
Right,
Okay?
just the ramp, because aluminum
So-
has skyrocketed.
We're
So
trying to
that's
figure
why
out
we're-
how we can get this building lower.
Right,
Because if we
Yeah.
get it lower, we don't need an ADA ramp.
right. So if we look at building 8, like where you toured with Dr. Murphy and Ms. Curry, where their teacher's lounge is at, that's somewhat of a modular building, but sat flat on the ground. But they call that more of an pre-engineered building.
Pre-engineered,
Not
so
a
we may
modular.
end up having to
Do
go
that?
back, we may have to go
So-
back to the drawing board, because this number's getting out of hand.
Right.
Yeah.
So now you're getting in a number
That's
of, you know,
crazy.
how much does it cost to build, you know, a 6-room classroom like we're talking about. So, but we're still really about, we feel very comfortable with the high school modular. It only costs, when I
Spending
say.
60,000 on the
No,
ramp?
no. That right there is probably, I couldn't give you a solid number, like I said, they're about
Hopefully
2
it'd
weeks.
be half.
Yeah,
And
I'd
it's
say
not
you're
gonna be
probably,
5.
yeah,
Okay, I mean, you need to understand that this is going to be, to get in this 32-inch egress is going to cost some money. I would say safely $20,000 in prep, site prep.
right.
Now, let me ask you this question. Can that be a wooden ramp? Or do they,
It could.
since it's a
Sure,
temporary
it could
building,
be, absolutely.
and that might reduce costs, I mean,
It would, possibly.
it's gonna
Price
increase
it
maintenance,
goes
it's gonna
through.
increase maintenance on the other
Right,
end.
it's gonna create, it's gonna decrease the initial cost.
Right, but it's gonna, on the long run, it might not be the most economical,
Right.
because that ramp's gonna be expensive.
At this point, since
Mhm.
Box has declined to do the work under the conditions we signed the bid for,
Uh-huh.
we're not committed
We're
to
bound
No,
this.
no,
They
we're
have
not bound
not
at all.
ordered
No.
the modulars
No.
yet.
We have not.
The dilemma with us saying no to those statements, it just prolongs our ability to get into that space,
know.
knowing we need the extra space.
Correct.
I know, but
But we don't want
money's
to
a
commit.
thing.
Yes, I understand.
You know, money's a thing, that we have to, you know, we wanna be good stewards of it, and we can't just start throwing money at it because we didn't think about it being 32 inches off the ground and what all kind of chaos that was gonna cause.
On the accessibility,
Yeah.
we've not, Peyton and I have not put any modulars on the campus together. This is your first set of modulars
It
that
is.
you're putting on.
Yeah,
the
and, you know,
campus.
one thing I would say is, we're throwing these numbers around with ramps and everything, so yeah, originally, we were for sure planning on doing the concrete work ourselves. We're
Yeah.
planning on doing the ramps ourselves, which so that we can handle internal. Of course, you have the concrete piece now, that's what, we said in July. It just started, dealing with the federal side, turned over to Hill and Cox, dealing with, 3 different people, trying to complete the project. It just made more sense for us to just pass it on all to Hill and Cox, and let them work directly with
Yeah.
Box. So, when we started throwing around ADA ramps, everything else like that, logistics, gets a little bit expensive.
The
Well, and
number
we
is
haven't
much
even-
different than what we thought it was.
Yeah,
Correct.
and you hadn't
And
even
so you
talked
need to
about
know
the
that.
issue with the elementary one,
Right.
which is the fact that
Correct.
the,
Links, good.
let's go
Roll
back to the
over there.
elementary, because
Yeah.
it's not gonna fit, is what I hear.
Could we make it fit? Yes.
We can make it fit.
We can make it fit.
Under what
We can't,
conditions?
we can't have, under the conditions that we no longer have 5 classrooms, potentially no more than 4 maximum. Probably it would be a building that would be 2 pieces, not a single building.
Right.
Because we would have to address the grade issue by stair stepping and using the grade. On that building structure as is, I think there's a highlight picture in there from ground to roof level. We're estimating it to be almost 18 feet, 17 feet on the lower end on a modular. And we're talking about taking children that are in first grade, kindergarten into pull-out type, and so
Yeah.
that's gonna be a very tall ramp on this lower end, and we're not comfortable with even doing that for elementary purposes. When they
No.
showed that to us, we said, we have to go back to the drawing board on that one.
Yeah,
Because it's not conceivable for us to utilize different types of services for kindergartners, first graders, and second graders, and have them up on that type of a structure. Now, keep in mind, the grade portion would probably be no more, he thought, than 5.5 feet.
Right, grade wouldn't be too bad.
But we're 5.5 feet here on this last door down here if
Right.
a child ended up coming off of this ramp.
yeah.
And so we're just not comfortable with that. So if we cut that in half and stair stepped it out, we can stay down closer to the 3.5 to 4 foot range. But it's still 3.5 to 4 feet because of the elevation grade that we have shifting in that area. They're looking
Yeah.
specifically into this area. Really what we need with the slope that we're contending with is we either have to get to a different location,
Right?
or we have to pre-engineer it and get to the ground.
Yes. Yeah, I
And
think this,
alleviate 32 inches on the upper end, which becomes 4.5, 5 feet on the lower end.
yeah. I think there are,
We just don't like what we're seeing.
yeah, a lot more uncertainties than when we originally thought we're just gonna get some modulars and put them
Right.
in and have more classrooms, you
So
know, it's
the-
just not.
The intention behind that was to go the cheapest route possible,
Yeah.
utilizing ESSER funds.
Absolutely, still in favor of that.
Yeah, and the last thing I would say is, could we do both of these like we planned back in July? Absolutely. It's just logistically, when we thought over it over and over and over again, it's just, we don't think it's a solid decision, especially in the
I don't think so.
elementary.
I agree.
So there's too many things that
We
came
want to
into
have
place.
functional space.
Correct.
Yeah, and we don't, yeah,
If we're gonna have additional space, it needs to be functional. We went
think
back to
there's-
the drawing board again on utilizing and picking up 2 classrooms in between the high school and the middle school cafeteria, outside of cafeteria time. Part of that is storage, and that's where our FACES storage is at. We know storage is a premium on the campus.
right.
But that's an area that we could reconfigure slightly, that's existing space under roof. But here again, we do believe we need additional external space to
Yes.
accommodate our needs based on your walk through the elementary school today.
Yeah, we're just gonna come back to the drawing board, like you said, and not, when you're spending $500,000,
Mhm.
you don't wanna rush. And not that I wanna delay it,
We need to get it right.
Yeah.
but you want to feel good about it, and not feel like, well, we just threw something in there just
Right.
so we can say we got it. I don't wanna spend that kind of money. Granted, I'm 1 of 5, but, I think it deserves more consideration.
Right.
Well, our intention tonight is to make you aware of the uncertainties that we hold, and make you aware, even though you have approved an expenditure, we have not ordered these buildings based on the uncertainties.
Good. And
Yeah, I would just get a price from Bill Cox, and
Right.
we'll see what it is. See what the,
See where our numbers
what it's gonna
are.
take, see where it is.
Mhm.
And that's kind of where we're at. We were hoping to have it tonight, but we don't have it, and so as soon as we get it, we'll get it to
Because
you.
I see a pretty big number.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Off my rant.
Next.
Sorry.
I thought that was the one that always asks questions.
What do you got next?
So this is so Chief Riley started this past month. He finished his first monthly walkthroughs. He's going through every building on campus, elementary, middle school, and high school. He has 1 out of 10 items to go through and visit. Kind of his process is while he walks the hall, checks the closets, he will take this report. He'll visit either with the assistant principal of the building or the principal. Those findings he brings back to myself and shares with Dr. Murphy, and I think Mr. Campbell as well. So this is just our first month's review, and I believe if the principals want to comment, I know I've seen Ms. Curry send an email out regarding, and Mr. J has too, I think Sarah may have, regarding just a follow-up of what she found. So I have seen those come through, and
Probably the only thing I'd echo for anybody seeing this for the first time tonight, just because you see a no does not mean it's a deficiency. The questions are asked in the context of yeses and nos, and so a perfect score is not all yeses. So be mindful of that.
My biggest one was the number 5 on all of them. Is
The
it, are they
doors
supposed to be
locked.
closed or not?
When students are present, it's supposed to be locked.
So that should have been a yes on
Yes.
those. We hope moving forward will be.
Yes, it's,
Yes.
for it to be a yes, it's all. So if
So
we
he
had,
didn't find any,
yeah, I mean, if you have,
Unlocked
if you
doors.
have an individual failure of a classroom left cracked open.
Yeah,
and-
then it's a no.
and the third grade hallway, we have
Yeah.
one fail, all fail.
okay.
So it's not a threshold of percentage. He's gonna mark no on that unless,
How many doors did he check?
Everyone on
everyone
campus.
on campus.
And we
He
have
does
some
all.
doors that don't work, so it's gonna be in
So have
that.
those been
Did
turned
they
in?
be turned in?
Yep.
Why are they not fixed? That'd be my first question. If
Right.
they've been turned in, why have they not been fixed?
Hmm.
So that's where I would go with that.
So an example of a door that does not work that has children in it is where?
The library.
So in the library, the door going into the library is totally broken, or is it
It doesn't
unlocked?
close, it does not close all the way. I mean, there's an issue with the, what do you call that thing?
Well, the mag lock, we installed the mag locks this summer, but with that system for her door is completely turned off, she should be doing her door as a normal door.
There's no hole in it.
And that may be a sense, I don't know on that one.
Yeah, there's
So
no-
that's an example. Give us another example. They're asking
Like
about,
mine,
because
in
that's,
my building, the first month, with a few more doors, I think the second month, he said it was only like 3 or 4, very minimal considering how many. And sometimes ours are little people that have a little stopper at the end and they go to the bathroom, stopper goes down, the kid's gonna come back in, but my teachers know
Yeah,
they're not
when we
supposed
were
to do
there-
that,
Yeah.
so
When
just
we
kind
were
of real
listening-
simple things like that.
At our deal last week.
which building?
No, when we were,
At the leadership
Convention center.
training.
Yes, in the training.
didn't he talk about, I could be wrong, but, which is very well could be the case. But your exterior doors are the ones that are locked all the time.
Yes.
Didn't they talk about the interior doors,
That
like,
they-
they could be left open, they don't have to, didn't he say something like they could be unlocked or propped open? Because some teachers would prop their door open for whatever reason.
Yes, so where this all falls out, to have the highest degree of safety.
Yes.
This highest degree of student safety protocol is to have all interior doors locked throughout the school day. And so, an example that she's providing is you have a kindergarten student needs to use the restroom. So that kindergarten student that goes to the restroom, one, will not have an escort, and two, can't get back into the room.
Right.
And so somebody's gonna have to either let them into the room, or the teacher's gonna have to go let them into the room. One of the things that you oftentimes have to do to enhance the overall security is you have to take all your door stops and all your door, like those things that's got that door open over there. You go over there, and you have to take all of them off.
Right.
And you have to alleviate that, because if you're seeking a perfect score, you have to alleviate those obstacles. There used to be a rock over here that was in the exterior gymnasium door from the side entrance, because of where parents would drop off their children and they would come around to that side door. We've since fixed that, mag-locked that on the other side. They know the entry point to come into, and we've been able to get that rock out of that door. But those are examples of not only exterior, but also interior doors in a day and time where, you're not fail-safe if you have any entry point left obstructed. So, and it's ongoing, as I kind of open what the comments I was alluding to, is this has to be a staff, a student, a community issue. If we want a safe environment, because the further you deepen the safety level of your school, the greater the daily inconvenience begins to become. Because it is a challenge, but in that same context, you don't want to be vulnerable
Right.
by leaving, number one, an exterior door open, but secondarily, an interior door. And in our last safety meeting, we talked about specifically students inside the building and students who may be outside of the building, because when we have an intruder or a threat, we don't know the time nor the day that they may come, and so we could have kids on the playground, different locations, and so we have the ability to lock all exterior doors without the ability for people to even open them back up based on this maglock system.
It's
It's an ongoing process. The thing that I would tell you with what you're observing in the score, or whether you see, the healthy thing is that it creates a discussion. And with discussion, in most instances, will follow action to make the footprint stronger. And it will create additional improvements. And for me to sit here and tell a community that we're going to be 100% foolproof on a daily basis would be an inaccurate
Right,
statement.
you're never gonna be.
I mean,
Like
you can
it's-
go through that,
Right.
that conference, I mean.
Yeah. But our goal
Do your
is
best.
to strengthen our ability, our awareness, and, just like today, the number of substitutes that we had in the elementary school, are they mindful of the protocol and how they would react in that given situation as well? So anything we can do to strengthen that overall, that process of having school on a daily basis, but I still believe that what you're going to be seeing in the context of this information is, my hope would be is it strengthens the discussion among our employees with our principals and Chief Riley, and following through by presenting this at board level, our community is aware of it as well.
And I would say, like, stuff on this list, like, if there's something that, a door that doesn't work or it gets turned in, I mean, those should be priority type
Right.
deals.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just to defend the maintenance staff, they're not going to, they're going to prioritize exterior doors such as, we've had quite a bit of trouble with the band room, choir room door, the volume of traffic in and out of that on a daily basis. It's one of the high frequency of traffic, and it's an exterior door. So, when we have to place a priority, whether it is the upstairs media center doorway versus the band room hallway, they're gonna work on that maglock versus the other, but we can't not address the other issue. If she comes back to me in January, says, and we still can't fix that issue, then we failed, from a maintenance perspective.
And I think
Okay.
January's too long.
That's what I'm saying,
A
we would
month,
fail.
a month is pushing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying.
But I'm just,
Yeah.
Okay, so,
any other questions about the checklist? You'll be seeing that monthly.
So the one about the custodial door not being locked, there's just, chemicals in there that we don't want anybody?
Yeah, there's always,
they can hide in there.
liability associated. It's an area where we may be keeping items. There's no need for a student to be in that
Sure.
space. And so anytime that space is unlocked, it's available for a student to gain access to. And whether it's cracked or shut and unlocked, neither is a good option. Because there are typically cleaning chemicals and things in there that,
And so that's somebody
They get into
address that,
themselves,
whoever
right.
cleans the high school, let them lock the door.
yeah. So that feedback, sometimes that feedback would go back through Josh with our new cleaning company. Sometimes that feedback would go back through the principal, back through Hayden. What we're doing here, once again, in each of these checks, is we're creating a conversation.
Yep.
And in that conversation, you're gonna strengthen that footprint.
And that's something we've never seen, so I like
Yep,
this.
I
Do you want to talk about what we kind of talked about with the, like, there's a more extensive list.
And he uses, we were introduced at the conference to the Safety Site app. It's a national protocol on safe schools, and so Chief Riley has this app, and he does this type of walkthrough, which has well over 700 questions that are research-based to strengthen the school district's vulnerabilities when it comes to external threats or even internal threats in that regard. But that was a very comprehensive approach to looking at your physical plant, and also, extending into the only thing that I would add that I think would benefit us as well is to further extend into some climate surveys and do those consistently so we can begin to see that, as well as to where the overall student perception and staff perception of the climate, where you can see that at least twice a year or annually, year over year. That was mentioned in the conference as well.
Yeah, I left all my notes. I had notes
You
I
were
was
at the
gonna
conference,
bring,
you
but
remember all of
yeah.
I like the fact that, you know, I mean, it was a pretty extensive, not that you had to do all of them, but you could make, you could kind of take those and make your own.
Yes.
And it was, I mean, just him asking some of those questions, and you think about our campus.
Covered a lot of ground, because our campus is a campus like many other campuses in Arkansas. It's one building that as we grew, we built another building adjacent to, but did not connect to. And so, you know, we have 19 buildings that you can enter into on a campus of 1,300 students. And so that within itself creates a degree of vulnerability for us as school leaders, because every child that wants to go eat has to exit the middle school. Most children, and all children in the 2-4 to go eat has to exit their building. The high school has to exit their building to go eat. So most of our students are going outside of their, yeah, so, you know, and that was kind of the crux of what we were trying to accomplish in our in the elementary school concept, along with the build out of our facilities, as we were trying to strengthen and have a secondary cafeteria where all of our younger children were under one roof and they had all of their programming in that regard, because that was going to strengthen the overall safety. So with the failure of that, we have to turn and look at the existing facilities, how do we continue to strengthen them, and look out for student and staff safety. And as all of us know from the active shooter incident in Texas, it's been a hot topic as schools open the school year.
Well, let's, in the interest of letting our,
Time.
well, yeah, because we've got several,
We
we
got
got
a
our
few
whole
agendas
reports. Yeah, we got all the reports to the public this month. Yeah, so, I know we have the elementary, middle, and high school reports here. Is this the best place to have them, or would you like for them to speak to that during their individual report?
So
Just open them up, let Mr. Campbell, he may want to have a highlighting
just,
comment.
if you have questions about any of these, you'll hear from each of the principals during their
Yes.
report to the public. But if you had any question about their monthly reports, we've got those pulled up. Any questions about the elementary report that you would
I
have?
didn't see any, no, I didn't see anything.
Middle school report, any questions that you have or comments on the middle school report?
I like that information. It's nice to have month after month.
Right,
to-
and these are all linked into the
Yeah.
agendas, so they're available to all of the
I think
members.
overall, we have a lot of referrals.
Yeah. The fights and the vapes and the drugs is very concerning.
Yeah.
But,
In the
I mean,
middle
what do
school.
you do about it? You know, like, how do you fix, how to fix that? I did kind of want to know what the RTI process was for middle school. How that kind of works, how the kids were screened, who was screened.
Yeah, I explained it last month, but I'm happy to do it. We have, so an RTI process is built upon 3 tiers of intervention, so tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So that's ran primarily led by Ms. Richard, and so at the beginning of the year, we used 4 data points. Their NWEA testing, their ACT Aspire scores, their school attendance, and their overall grades to map out school, all of our school data to rank them basically as an identified risk. So they go into the RTI process if they're not otherwise receiving services through special education or dyslexia, because those students are already being pulled out into a small group intervention. So that left us with around 90 students that needed an intervention that were not otherwise identified. And so we meet about each of those students every 2 weeks in grade level teams. So you have 1 teacher from each grade level that is providing small group interventions, all of our special education push-in teachers, and Miss Lampo and Miss And
I saw push-in on the schedule, but explain to me what push-in means.
So push-in means they go into a class during their regular classroom setting, and pull-out means they come out of the class for a small group session.
So a push-in would be
How
the
does that
student
help?
stays and participates in the current classroom activity or instruction.
And they have the support of an additional teacher that's
Sitting there
right
with
there
them.
to reread something to them, rephrase it in words that they better understand, ask them specific questions to check their level of understanding.
Okay.
So a teacher can't always, we have around, our average class size is 32 students. So a teacher might not be able to provide that intensive support, but the push-in person can.
Where does the push-in teacher come from?
So they come from the building, so it's their job as either a paraprofessional, a special education, or we have 2 people on staff that are interventionists. So that's what their job is.
So the balance of push-in versus pull-out in terms of intervention support, does it vary greatly within the week? Is it a balance of roughly 50-50 that might help?
Yeah, so the only time that we pull out is during our COBRA hour, which is already identified as either intervention or enrichment. So they're not pulled out of any other classes. What are you doing over here?
Nothing.
So yeah.
Pulling my hair out.
So they're only coming out during the COBRA hour, and that's what that hour was created for.
That is something a little bit new this year that
Yeah.
we would indicate. It's a strategy in terms of, as we've looked at the length of our day and the number of passing periods, we've alleviated an actual period. And so the COBRA hour is, it's either designed for enrichment or remediation, and then all students 1 day a week receive enrichment. Is that
Yes,
fair
in the
statement?
form of like what they previously knew as their BSP Select courses.
And the other thing I would commend the work of the middle school on is they're working very hard to not, when a student goes into remediation, that they're kind of stuck there for an extended, lengthy period of time. Those reviews, they could get out of remediation in
2 weeks.
roughly 2 weeks.
Yeah, so their data is, we're talking about current data. We're not talking about data from last year. We're talking about their current module, their current unit, their current test scores. And so every week during the PLC, students are either recommended to be removed from intervention or to be placed. And so if we have a really big concern, especially with some of our new students that we may not have all of these data points on, we have 2 different screeners that we use. And so Ms. Lampo and Ms. Roundtree will screen the students so that we have 4 data points for both literacy and math to make the decisions before we pull them into an intervention.
I'm
So-
I'm anxious to kind of see the impact to the strategy that we're implementing. It's fundamentally we're making decisions, in my opinion, in a shorter time frame,
Yeah.
which my hope would be greater internal motivation of the individual student. The apathy that some students take on, if they know they're in remediation, and I'm gonna be in remediation the next 9 to 10 weeks, that a kid at that age may not see the light to really work to get beyond that moment. And so I pay a lot of attention to intrinsic motivation of students in their learning, and what we're trying to do with this model is give them some intrinsic motivation to get back into enrichment.
And it's building a lot of capacity with the teachers to understand how the content that they're teaching, what impact that has on the student's level of understanding. And so really, this is kind of a school turnaround process that I did at my old job. And so I just really, that's the place that we're in response to COVID. And so just bringing the teachers and the students more in tune with the data versus just being stuck on, I did really bad on my ACT Aspire last year. Well, that doesn't doom you for the next 12 months. Like, what's currently happening with you, you know? So that's it's a lot.
That's the driving philosophy. Now, how we deliver on that, that's kind of the crux, and that may be embraced well by all, or maybe embraced well by a few, but I wanted that to be heard again because I think it's important for people listening to understand what we're thinking in terms of motivation for making that change.
And those students that are being pulled out, like their parents know they're pulled out, like they've been identified, right? I mean, I'm assuming.
Well, so they're just identified in need of intervention. So it's nothing, they're not being referred for special education or anything like that. So it is identified in their COBRA hour grade, and so that's a cumulative grade of enrichment and intervention. So it is communicated, but not, I mean, you don't hold a conference or anything
So
like
it
that.
doesn't trigger an IEP.
No,
an
no, I
initial
just didn't know
conference.
if the parents know, like it's
Right.
maybe
Would they
nice to
even
know
know?
that somebody's coming in and helping your child individually.
So
I'd kind of like to see that working, so maybe next month or so.
is it just teachers, like teachers are the only ones that recommend it, or if parents see something?
A lot of parents recommend it too. So that's one of our first things that, you know, when interim reports went out, of course, that triggers a lot of conversations about academic success or failure. And so in those conversations with parents, they said, you know, what else are you gonna do? My kid's struggling. And so we let them know, like, these are the things that we have to offer, that we can offer them 4 45-minute sessions a week in a small group intervention, that we have tutoring after school, Monday, you know, or Tuesdays and Thursdays for 7th and 8th grade and 5th and 6th through bases. So just offering them all of the additional opportunities that we have if, you know, they would like to benefit that.
Good, that's great information, and thank you
You're
so
welcome.
much. And-
Questions for the high, or go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, did anybody have any questions about high school report?
One other question for Mrs. Emmett.
Uh-huh.
We're gonna decrease student discipline by 25%, 25% for the previous month, 25% overall.
Well, I have great news, Lloyd. Even though that number might look really scary, in comparison to last year's data, we're down 21% already. So I am celebrating. Yes, I am almost there.
We're decreasing 25% over last year's.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
we are
Thank
well
you.
on our way.
I'm thrilled too, because when I see 3 vapes and 7 fights,
We
I
are
know
better
it's
this
a
year.
battle. I know it's a battle you guys are fighting
Yeah.
in the trenches, and I know that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, we're
No,
good.
Great. Questions on the high school?
They better have some questions for you. I have some questions.
We better come up with something.
I gave you a long list of upcoming events.
I don't want to, it's not necessarily high school, but on the special ed, I did want to know, what is a transfer, what is a referral, and what do those mean?
So referral,
Referral for special ed, got that?
Yeah, that's
okay.
referral for special ed,
Yes.
transfer of new students coming
Okay.
in.
Coming in
Who
or
are
out?
already identified,
Coming
coming in. Reevaluations, that's a required, and every 3 years, they have to have their reevaluation. And then separate programming or other, if that's if you need to change a student's placement, or they have some additional identification, or something along that way, you're looking at an issue with a specific child, and so you have the SBC, the separate program conference.
And
If we need
that
to
could
change
be
it,
academically, or that could be behaviorally. Could be based on a student disciplinary infraction.
Right.
It could trigger any of those conferences.
No questions for high school, but I'm glad you got the attendance rates correct. I'm like, that
It's all right.
Boy, that's a slam.
It's all right.
And we did go back and correct that on the August report as well.
Yeah. I was like, whoa, that's good.
was 5 minutes of conversation that we had over that last month.
The detectors, those are still, what, 3 months out, something like that?
Christmas?
Come in and did some initial wiring.
They've been starting about 3 a.m. and working to about 8 a.m. Getting wire pulled to these locations. So vape detectors arrived in Dallas last week. They should be arriving in Arkansas soon. So we're probably a month and a half to 2 months out. Yeah. So moving a little bit quicker than I thought. Yeah.
To be installed.
To be installed, I'd say, if everything goes right, less than 2 months, everything's installed.
But I mean, will we start seeing some of them come in, and the principals can start monitoring?
We could.
new
We could
locations
install some.
next
Get
month?
first
Sure.
steps, is my idea.
Sure. Middle school's gonna be the hardest. Getting wire from the 3rd floor down, but everywhere else should be pretty easy.
Okay.
From the mezzanine.
Another tool in your tool belt also.
Mr. J, I do have a question. Yeah. I see that you're using, I guess it's some software called ExactPath
Correct.
as an intervention tool. Is that just a,
So that would be
like, they
Ninth
sit
and
at a
10th grade.
computer? What is ExactPath?
Literally, it's a computer software program that'll help us hopefully close some of those reading gaps, math gaps. So it's being used in conjunction with what current kids' knowledge are currently, plus a tie into the NWA, so we have some type of formalized score to pull in. But once again, we're trying to, you'll find that during that report to the public, we've got a problem moving the bottom end of some of our kids.
Yeah.
Because when I'm watching them go from 8th grade and I'm at 25 in need of support, and then I get at 45 when they're hitting 9th grade. That's not an acceptable number in my book. So
Yeah.
I want to move those kids.
Is this intervention tool, is this a pull out from the regular class, or is it something?
We use it during their advisory class.
Okay,
So we've kind of got it geared up to run 3 days a week. And they'll still have their same advisory. They're not having to transfer anywhere or go anywhere else.
Okay.
Once again, this hopefully will meet the kid where they are, and then we can start moving those gaps a little closer together.
does it
So
do some kind of, it assesses where they are?
we can use it as that assessment, or we can actually put in the information that they've already done in the past.
Okay, and then it knows where to start and how
It's
to
somewhat
progress.
adaptive. is
Correct.
what
Adaptive,
you-
that was the word I was looking for.
So we're looking at that with
Yeah.
9th and 10th
Adaptive
graders.
Adaptive software.
And then the 11th and 12th, we're looking at, we're using ACT work keys. Ms. Keys is working to get those kids loaded. So it's focused on the ACT portion for juniors, hopefully giving them enough time to go from now till end of February, beginning of March, with some testing skills and strategies on how to navigate that test in March. And then for our seniors, it's the career side, showing them, this is everything you've done. Now you need to start telling us what you're interested in.
Yeah.
Here's what the jobs pay. This is what it's going to take. For a lot of places right now, it's show up.
Not hard, not how to show up. Okay, well, good, I'm glad to hear about that
So-
software, so thank you for that. Any other questions for the high school? Any public comment tonight, Mr. Campbell? All right, we have an item of new business, and since Brian is not here, who wants to read the motion? Cindy? Okay.
Motion to approve the purchase of a fire alarm system for the high school from is that Solutions?
Yes.
In the amount of $149,511.88.
Okay. We have had a chance to look this over, and I think my first question on this is, this is a lot of money for what we in the old school knew as a fire alarm at the end of the hall that you pull and it sets off an alarm and everybody leaves. Those are probably $100. So, given the fact that we have not had a building fire in, I don't even know how many years, if ever, can you justify to this board spending that much money on a fire alarm system that in all likelihood will not see a whole lot of activity?
You're absolutely right. I mean, the chances of it going off are very, very slim. And I
Right.
know one thing I'll just throw in here, what really makes us high, could we go back and fix what we have? Yes. We can probably get everything fixed probably for about $25,000 to $28,000.
Right, but that was an old analog.
Correct. That's all an analog system that's running through copper wires.
What year? Originated in 92.
When was that high school built?
92.
92.
So it's a 92 system.
Yeah, I think I got refreshed in 98.
30 years old.
So it's pretty old. So what really gets us is current code. So anytime you're doing a new fire alarm install, we have to do smokes now. Right now, we don't have any classroom, besides the middle school on campus, they even have smoke detectors in classrooms. Again, we haven't had an issue in the past, to go through and start installing smoke detectors, but current code as of 2014 and newer now requires smokes and strobe and voice evac in every classroom and all hallways and bathrooms.
And this
janitor
is
closets.
Arkansas or federal, or what kind of statute?
I couldn't give you that answer, I can find out, I'm pretty
I
sure it's
don't know who
Arkansas.
made the codes, if it was
Correct.
Hot Springs or,
Right, I can find that out and
How
definitely
do-
email it to you.
how did you know what the code was?
When we do any new constructions, like when we did the health center upgrade, when we do any library upgrades, like when we did the hospital library this past summer, any type of renovations that we do, we gotta bring that plate, that room.
You touch it.
Yeah, but where do you find out what the code is?
You-
I mean, how do
I have a facility book that looks like that thick, so I mean, it's just.
Okay, it's
all
from the
about it.
Arkansas School Board,
It is.
or the
So you're gonna have
Arkansas
a,
schools.
you'll have a base level
Department of Ed.
expectation within the state. What I've found in my career working in different counties, some counties will go above and beyond the state requirement, and you have to abide to the county code above and beyond the state
Okay,
as a
Yeah.
component of that work was the county in which you reside. But what he's talking about is statewide. Your obligation to touch it will only be at the point in time that you conduct a major renovation, or in the event that it fails,
Which
you
it
have
did.
an option to potentially make that existing system work. But as soon as you start down this path of let's say that we don't have the occupancy in this location, so we're gonna remain analog over here, we're gonna upgrade. Once we touch it and say we're gonna move forward, then
You got it.
anything attached to that system has to be updated with the strobes, and the money is really in all of the networking of the strobes and the intricacies of the system. The only thing I'm going to add is because the system is an analog system and the age that it is, the piece that you've got to be mindful of, and the money that we save in a wooden ramp versus an aluminum ramp, every time they come out here to work on this analog system, I can promise you it's gonna be $1,000.
okay, and I'm not advocating that we fix the analog system, so.
No,
I'm
I think
not.
it's important for people to
Yes.
understand why we're spending this kind of money on a
Is
analog
this,
system.
is this quote the minimum to meet code, or is this one of those that's going above and beyond,
No.
like you just mentioned?
This is strictly the meat
Yeah,
code.
we cover.
Yeah, only.
This is only to meet code?
Correct.
The only advantage I would say that it gives you is if you put this modular in the future, this new system that we have, we can tie into that and make it a part of the system, where it'll cost us a lot more money to touch this analog system and make it work with external buildings.
Right, yeah, so the expansion footprint is huge. So anywhere we can get a data drop to, network drop or fiber optic to that location makes it very easy to tie in. So like Dr. Murphy said, for one system, like for a standalone system for the health clinic, we paid about $9,800 just for that standalone Honeywell. That's in the health clinic right now. So if we add these modulars, $9,800 for one, $9,800, probably more for the other one.
Right.
This way, as long as we take fiber optic to it, we can tie it in to the existing system. So you're looking at, don't quote me, I mean,
Right.
you're probably at a $1,200 expense
Does this have an automatic dialer?
for just automatic dial,
To dial the
EMS.
fire department?
Yes.
911?
Yes.
Tie in.
Yeah,
Okay,
And
and
this-
this is the second question I have. This is just for the high school 4 buildings.
correct,
So when we upgrade the middle school and tie in, then we'll have the additional.
correct, yeah, and we really need to, we really need to have this everywhere on campus in the rest of the buildings. It's going to be a very slow migration, the elementary
We
needs it.
have 19 buildings.
The elementary needs it. Middle
And
school's
this
in the
is for
best
4.
shape.
So what's
Right.
that,
But those buildings have a functional compliant
Correct.
system.
Correct, and they all
The
pass.
system we're discussing and the building which we're
Has failed.
discussing it is failing.
Right.
Your question, Corey?
No other expenses with this?
no, I just
That-
know what
that's
you
turnkey,
talking about
that's
the
it.
footprint, if you get a data drop to it, you can be on the same system. Can we not do that to the elementary and do that?
Correct, yes. So what we're really paying for, the biggest thing is the back-end consoles. So we'll have the console in safe room A, safe room B, that's gonna be running this. So whenever we do tie in, like I said, we add elementary in the future, your cost, again, don't quote me, it's gonna be at half that cost. just because all the main
elementary schools
components.
that you've already did.
Already
So we have a
purchased.
major component.
Correct.
We have a major backbone.
That's right. Then we add another building, now you're just really just paying for a subcontroller, and then all your smokes, lights, everything ties into the network.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
I want to make a comment. Hayden and I have had several very lengthy conversations about this expenditure because it is a.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
But, you know, we need to hold a level of compliance and compatibility to take our facilities into, quite frankly, the compliance of the 21st century. And so this will be the first step, and I know it's expensive, but it is not only going to take care of the buildings and the classrooms, it's going to give us the back end to add additional facilities in the future.
Okay. So the motion is to approve the purchase of a fire alarm system for the high school from Fast Solutions in the amount of $149,511.88. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, that motion carries 4-0.
We approved that one.
The aluminum ramp would have been cheaper. So, all right, next motion.
Motion to accept the resignation of Tina Vaughn as District 8 effective October 7th, 2022.
Okay, that was Friday, effective Friday. Any questions? We've had a chance to look over her resignation letter. We have a motion to accept the resignation of Tina Vaughn as District Aide effective October 7th, 2022. All in favor, say aye. Aye. None opposed? That motion carries 4-0. I guess we have to, if we're gonna do this discipline issue, it has to be done now as part of this meeting.
Yes, so what I would recommend is that we have an opportunity to adjourn to discuss this in executive
We do have a
session.
student discipline issue that needs just a few moments of discussion. Because we have several other reports to get to, I'm going to commit that this will not last more than, 5 minutes or so. But if y'all will excuse us, we're going to executive session, and we will be back as quickly as possible.